They appeared without warning in the skies over Europe and the Pacific. Glowing balls of light danced next to bomber groups. Fireballs chased fighter planes through clouds. Strange lights broke every rule of physics that military science knew. Allied pilots called them Foo Fighters. For years after the war ended, no one could explain what they were. No one knew where they came from. This is not a story about mistaken sightings or war panic. This is about one of the most documented mysteries of World War II. Hundreds of trained military observers saw these things. They wrote about them in official mission reports. Intelligence agencies on both sides looked into them, but they never found a good answer. The first confirmed sighting happened over Germany in November 1944. American bomber crews were returning from a raid. They reported strange balls of light following their planes. The objects were bright orange. They were about 3 feet wide. They moved with perfect accuracy. They matched the speed of the bombers exactly. When pilots tried dodge moves, the lights followed. When they climbed, the lights climbed. When they dropped down, the lights dropped with them. The crews thought they were seeing some new German secret weapon, maybe remote-controlled guns using radar, or test rockets built to track and destroy Allied planes. But the objects never attacked. They just watched. They floated near wingtips and tail sections. They glowed steadily. Then they disappeared as strangely as they had shown up. Lieutenant David McFalls was one of the first to file an official report. He flew with the 415th Night Fighter Squadron. On the night of the 23rd of November, 1944, McFalls and his radar man were flying a routine patrol near Strasbourg. They spotted what looked like 10 orange fireballs coming toward their plane. The objects moved in formation. They kept perfect spacing between each other. McFalls tried to catch them. He pushed his fighter to top speed. The lights sped up easily. They stayed just out of reach. His radar man watched his screen carefully. The objects showed no radar signal. They were invisible to the most advanced equipment the Allies had, but they were clearly visible to the naked eye. They were bright enough to light up the cockpit. McFalls chased them for several minutes. Then they suddenly shot straight up at impossible speed. They disappeared into the night sky. When McFalls got back to base and filed his report, intelligence officers doubted him. They said he had seen reflections from ice crystals high in the air, or maybe flares dropped by German planes to confuse night fighters. McFalls said no to both ideas. Ice crystals did not move in formation. Flares fell toward the ground. They did not stay level next to moving planes. More sightings came fast after that. On the 27th of November, pilots from the 415th Night Fighter Squadron saw the lights again. This time, there were 8 of them. They were arranged in 2 rows of 4. They stayed with the American planes for over 15 minutes. They kept perfect formation the whole time. One pilot tried to fly right through them. The lights just moved aside. They let his plane pass. Then they went back to their positions. The pilot who flew through the formation was Lieutenant Edward Schluter. He later described the moment in his mission report. He said he felt no resistance as his plane passed through where the lights had been. The air felt normal. His instruments showed no changes. It was as if the lights were not really there in a physical sense. Yet he could see them clearly with his own eyes. So could his crew. This contradiction troubled him for years afterward. Another pilot, Captain Fred Ringwald, had a different experience that same week. He was flying his P-70 Night Fighter on patrol when a single orange light appeared off his right wing. It stayed there for nearly 30 minutes. Ringwald tried everything to lose it. He climbed to 2,000 feet. The light climbed with him. He dove down to 5,000 feet. The light matched his descent perfectly. He tried tight spirals. The light spiraled with him. Finally, he just flew straight and level. The light did the same. Then it blinked out as if someone had flipped a switch. By early December, reports flooded in from many squadrons. The lights appeared over the Rhine Valley, over Belgium, over France. They showed up during day missions and night missions. Some looked like orange balls, others looked like bright red balls of fire. A few pilots saw lights that changed color. They shifted from orange to red to white as they moved. Ground observers added their own reports. Anti-aircraft gun crews reported seeing the lights pass overhead at high speed. The lights moved too fast for the guns to track. Some gunners tried to shoot at them anyway. Their shells exploded near the lights but seemed to have no effect. The lights continued on their course as if nothing had happened. This worried military commanders. If these were enemy devices, they appeared to be invulnerable to conventional weapons. The strange sightings were not just American. British bomber crews reported the same things. RAF pilots talked about glowing balls that followed their Lancaster bombers deep into German territory. The objects acted the same way. They kept formation. They matched speed. They never attacked. They showed flight abilities that made no sense. What made the sightings really disturbing was how precise the lights were. These were not random natural events. They moved with clear purpose and smarts. When planes changed height, the lights adjusted their position to keep the best viewing distance. When formations split up, single lights would break off to follow separate planes. The behavior showed active tracking. It was as if the objects were watching Allied air operations on purpose. Lieutenant Henry Giblin ran into them on the 22nd of December while flying a mission over Germany. He saw a single red ball that appeared off his left wing. The object was about the size of a basketball. It glowed with light from inside, as if lit from within. Giblin tried every move he knew to shake it. Sharp turns, steep dives, fast climbs. The ball matched every movement perfectly. It kept its position next to his plane like it was tied there by an invisible rope. After 20 minutes of failed escape tries, Giblin decided to try something different. He slowed his plane to almost stalling speed. The ball slowed with him. He pushed the throttle forward and sped up fast. The ball sped up instantly. It had no visible way of moving. There was no exhaust trail, no rocket flame, no sign of any engine or power source. The object just moved, smooth and silent. It broke every rule of how things fly. When Giblin finally got back to base, he found that 3 other pilots in his squadron had run into similar objects during the same mission. Each one reported the same things: glowing balls that matched plane movements perfectly. They showed no radar signal. They could speed up and move in ways that seemed impossible. Allied intelligence agencies started looking into it right away. The worry was clear. If these objects were German weapons, they meant a huge jump in technology. If they could track planes so well, they might be gathering targeting data for future attacks. Teams of scientists and engineers looked at the reports. They searched for patterns or answers. Intelligence officers interviewed every pilot and crew member who reported a sighting. They asked detailed questions. What color were the lights? How big did they appear? How long did the encounter last? Did the lights make any sound? Did they leave any trails? The answers were remarkably consistent across different crews and different dates. This consistency made the mystery even deeper. Some pilots theorized among themselves about what the lights might be. A few suggested they were some kind of remote viewing device. Maybe the Germans had found a way to project cameras into the sky. Others wondered if they were targeting systems for new weapons that would come later. Some even joked that they were ghosts of dead pilots watching over the living. But nobody really knew. The jokes masked genuine fear and confusion. Several ideas came up quickly. Some investigators said the lights were street Elmo's fire. That is a natural electrical glow that happens around planes in certain weather. But street Elmo's fire appears as a spread-out glow on metal surfaces, not as clear ball-shaped objects flying on their own. Other experts suggested ball lightning. That is a rare weather event with ball-shaped electrical bursts. But ball lightning is random and short-lived. The Foo Fighters showed steady behavior over long periods. The most popular military idea was that the objects were German mind war weapons, maybe remote-controlled drones with powerful lights. built to upset Allied aircrews and mess up bombing runs. But this idea had serious problems. The lights appeared in many theaters at the same time. This suggested a wide rollout that would need huge resources. German industry was already stretched thin by late 1944. They could barely keep up production of regular weapons. Building and using a whole new class of aircraft seemed impossible. Also, if the lights were German weapons, why did they never attack? Even a mind war weapon needs to show some ability to work. The Foo Fighters just watched. They followed planes. They matched their movements. They vanished. They caused no damage. They fired no weapons. They made no aggressive moves. As terror weapons, they were really bad at their job. As Christmas 1944 came close, sightings jumped way up. Pilots reported seeing many objects during single missions, sometimes as many as 15 or 20 at once. The lights appeared in different colors and setups. Some moved in tight groups. Others flew alone. A few pilots said the lights seemed to talk to each other. They moved in matched patterns that suggested some form of silent signaling. Crew members began keeping personal logs of their encounters. They noted dates, times, locations, and the number of lights seen. Some drew sketches of the formations. Others tried to measure the distances and speeds involved. These personal records now provide valuable details that official reports sometimes missed. They show just how common the sightings had become. One bomber crew flying over France on the 23rd of December counted 17 separate lights during their mission. The lights appeared in groups of 3 or 4. They would pace the bomber for several minutes. Then they would peel off and disappear. Minutes later, new lights would appear to take their place. This relay pattern continued for over an hour. The crew felt like they were being escorted or studied throughout their entire mission. On the 27th of December, a B-17 bomber crew ran into what might have been the most amazing display of the whole war. Flying over the Netherlands, they spotted about 30 glowing objects coming from the east. The objects were different colors. They ranged from bright white to deep red. They arranged themselves in a perfect circle around the bomber. They kept equal spacing like points on a compass. The formation held for nearly 10 minutes. It rotated slowly around the plane. Then, as if answering some unspoken order, all 30 objects shot away in different directions. They disappeared. The crew's story was really valuable because it came from 10 different watchers. All were trained military people. The pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bomb man, radio operator, and 5 gunners all saw the same event. They gave matching descriptions of how the objects looked and moved. The radio operator wrote down specific times and positions. He created a detailed timeline of the meeting. Intelligence officers could not easily brush off such testimony. These were not jumpy civilians or shaky witnesses. They were experienced airmen who had flown dozens of combat missions. They knew the difference between enemy planes, flak bursts, and weather events. What they described did not fit any known group. By January 1945, the strange events had spread to the Pacific Theater. American pilots flying missions over Japan reported the same meetings with glowing balls. The objects showed the same features as their European cousins: perfect formation flying, impossible movement abilities, no radar signal, no aggressive behavior. The matching reports across 2 separate war zones, thousands of miles apart, made coincidence seem less and less likely. Lieutenant Robert Wilson was flying a patrol mission near Iwo Jima when he ran into 3 orange lights. They came at his fighter from below. They climbed straight up at high speed. Wilson guessed their speed at over 500 miles per hour. That was faster than any known plane of that time. The lights reached his height. They formed a triangle around his plane. They held position for about 5 minutes. Wilson's radio messages during the meeting were recorded by his carrier's communications officer. This gave real-time proof of the sighting. What struck Wilson most was how the lights seemed aware of his actions. When he turned his head to look at one light, it seemed to pulse brighter, as if it was noticing his attention. When he reached for his weapon controls, all three lights instantly sped away. They disappeared in seconds. The behavior suggested not just tracking ability but some form of thinking response. Ground crews also reported seeing the mystery lights. Anti-aircraft teams across Europe described glowing objects that appeared at high height. They moved against the winds. They showed no match with known plane movements. Weather stations recorded odd radar returns that made no sense. Weather experts noted air conditions that should have made certain types of events impossible. Yet pilots kept reporting sightings under those exact conditions. The science community struggled to give answers. Dr. Raymond Palmer was a physicist working with military intelligence. He looked at dozens of reports and found disturbing patterns. The objects seemed to like certain heights, usually between 15000 and 25000 feet. They appeared more often during evening and night missions. Though daytime sightings happened regularly, they showed a preference for bomber groups over single planes. As if larger groups got more attention, Palmer suggested the objects might be some form of electrical event, maybe created by plane engines mixing with air electricity. But his math showed that any such effect would be brief and local. It would last seconds at most. The Foo Fighters stayed around for minutes or even hours. They followed planes across hundreds of miles. No known electrical idea could explain such behavior. As the war entered its last months, sightings kept coming. In February 1945, pilots from the 416th Bombardment Squadron saw lights during a raid on Dresden. The objects appeared as the bomber group got near the target. They followed the planes through heavy flak. When the formation turned for home, the lights kept their positions until the bombers crossed out of German airspace. Then they vanished at the same time. In March, British pilots reported a meeting near Hamburg where lights seemed to interact with each other. Many objects moved in complex patterns. They wove between planes in a formation. At one point, two lights came toward each other. They merged into a single larger ball. Then they separated again. The display suggested either advanced technology or something beyond current understanding of physics. The most unnerving part of the events was how they kept happening despite human activity. Pilots who fired at the lights reported no effect. Bullets passed through the glowing balls without impact, as if the objects were not really there. A few pilots managed to fly their planes right through lights. They felt no collision or resistance. One navigator said he passed through a red ball and felt brief warmth in the cockpit, but nothing else. This ability to pass through things raised disturbing questions. If the lights were not solid objects, what were they? Pure energy? Eye tricks? Projections from an unknown source? Each answer created new problems. Energy needs a source and acts according to physical laws. Eye tricks cannot be seen at the same time by many separate watchers. Projections need something to project onto. Yet the lights appeared in empty sky. When Germany gave up in May 1945, intelligence teams moved quickly into occupied territory. They searched for proof of secret weapons programs. They found V-2 rocket places, jet plane development centers, many test weapon projects. But they found nothing that explained the Foo Fighters. No remote-controlled planes capable of the flight features they saw, no light-based weapon systems, no papers describing anything like the glowing balls that had haunted Allied pilots for months. The search was thorough. Teams examined captured German research facilities. They reviewed thousands of documents. They questioned hundreds of scientists and engineers. They found advanced rocket technology. They found early jet engine designs. They found plans for guided missiles. But nothing matched the Foo Fighters. Questioning German scientists and military officers gave equally puzzling results. Many reported that German Air Force pilots had run into the same things. German air crews talked about seeing mystery lights over Allied territory. They thought they were some secret weapon made by the British or Americans. The discovery that both sides had seen the same unexplained objects added a new twist to the mystery. Each side thought they belonged to the enemy. After the war ended, official interest in the events faded fast. The military had bigger worries: occupation duties, sending soldiers home, the new Cold War threat. Reports of wartime oddities were filed away. They were classified for security reasons, but mostly forgotten. Most pilots who ran into the lights went back to civilian life. They rarely spoke about what they saw. The few who did often faced doubt or mockery. But the reports did not disappear completely. In the 1950s, researchers looking into UFO events discovered the Foo Fighter files in military records. The detailed papers, many witness accounts, and official looks into it gave strong proof that something genuinely unusual had happened during the war. The matching reports across different theaters, air forces, and time periods made simple dismissal hard. Different answers have been suggested over the decades. Some researchers say the lights were test planes from a secret program so classified that even most military people knew nothing about it. But no such program has ever been revealed. This is despite nearly 80 years passing and countless wartime secrets being declassified. Others point to natural events not well understood in the 1940s: ball lightning, air electrical bursts. Ionized gas pockets can create glowing effects in the sky. But none of these events can track moving planes with accuracy. They cannot keep formation over long periods. They cannot respond to pilot actions with clear smarts. The alien idea has its supporters. The thought that some outside intelligence was watching human conflict, observing our most destructive war with detached curiosity. The behavior of the lights supports this. Their non-aggressive nature, their clear ability to break known physical laws, but it requires accepting that Earth was under watch during a specific time in history. This claim raises as many questions as it answers. Some physicists have looked at stranger possibilities. Could the lights have been some form of plasma that got temporary stability through unknown processes? Might they have been signs of dimension overlap, where energy from alternate realities briefly crossed with ours? Could they be a natural event so rare and complex that it happens only under very specific conditions? Conditions that wartime somehow created? The truth is that no single answer explains all the features people saw. The Foo Fighters remain exactly what they were in 1944, unidentified. They were real enough to be seen by hundreds of trained watchers. They were documented in official reports. Military intelligence looked into them. Yet they resisted every attempt at sensible explanation. What makes the events really important is the historical setting. This was not a case of lone witnesses reporting vague lights in the sky. These were military people engaged in warfare. Mistaken identity could mean the difference between life and death. Pilots flying combat missions were trained to spot threats instantly and correctly. Their survival depended on it. When such watchers consistently report seeing objects that behave in impossible ways, their testimony carries real weight. The paperwork is equally important. Unlike many odd events that rely on word-of-mouth stories or faded memories, the Foo Fighters left a paper trail: mission reports, intelligence briefings, radar records. Pilot debriefings created a full archive of the sightings. This paperwork allows modern researchers to look at the events with accuracy. They can identify patterns and features that might otherwise be lost to time. Maybe the most unsettling part is how the events suddenly stopped. After being a regular thing throughout late 1944 and early 1945, sightings dropped sharply after the war ended. A few lone reports came up in the late 1940s and early 1950s, but nothing like the wartime frequency. Whatever the lights were, they seemed specifically interested in military planes during active combat. This timing has led some researchers to suggest the events were indeed smart, whether technological or otherwise. The lights appeared when human conflict reached its most intense point. They watched our weapons and tactics. They left once the immediate crisis passed. The behavior suggests purpose rather than random chance. Lieutenant David McFalls spent decades after the war trying to understand what he had seen. His 1944 meeting was among the first officially documented. In talks done in the 1970s and 1980s, he stayed firm about the reality of his experience. He described the lights as showing clear intent. They tracked his plane with accuracy that no known technology of that time could manage. He noted that the objects seemed curious rather than threatening. They watched without interfering. McFall's rejected answers based on mistaken identity or weather events. He had flown over 200 combat missions. He had run into every type of flak, tracer fire, and air effect known to pilots. The Foo Fighters were different. They moved with purpose. They responded to plane movements. They showed features that suggested either technology far beyond what existed then, or something not technological at all. Other pilots who ran into the lights shared similar beliefs. They described a sense of being watched, of sharing airspace with something that was studying them. Some found the experience unnerving, others just found it puzzling. But few doubted that they had seen something genuinely odd. The events raise questions that go beyond simple identification. If the lights were watching military operations, what did they learn? If they were signs of natural processes, what triggered them specifically during wartime? If they were technological devices, who built them and why? More reports from late 1944 showed even stranger features. On the 14th of December, a group of B-24 liberators ran into lights that seemed to talk through changes in brightness. Many pilots reported seeing the balls pulse in matched sequences. One light would brighten, then dim. Moments later, another would repeat the pattern. Captain Harold Augsburger gave one of the most detailed accounts from this time. Flying a P-47 Thunderbolt over Germany, he ran into 7 orange balls at 18,000 feet. When he tried to engage, the balls split into 2 groups. 4 moved to his left, 3 to his right. He tried barrel rolls, split-S dives, Immelman turns. The lights matched every movement. After 15 minutes, the objects suddenly sped up to several thousand miles per hour. They vanished. The event left Augsburger deeply shaken. In his debriefing, he stressed that the lights showed awareness. They responded to his actions before he finished them, as if they were guessing his next move. This predictive behavior suggested either advanced sensors or something more unsettling. Ground crews added to the records as well. Maintenance people at air bases across England reported seeing lights hovering over runways and hangars. The objects dropped slowly to about 1,000 feet. Then they hovered without moving for minutes to hours. Several tries were made to photograph the events, but every photo came out blank or showed only unclear blurs. This photo failure became a pattern. Many documented tries resulted in useless images. Some researchers said the lights gave off radiation outside what eyes can see. Others suggested the object somehow messed with photo equipment. By January 1945, sightings had become so common that pilots developed informal procedures. If lights appeared during a mission, crews were told to note their position and document their behavior. Then continue with the assigned task. The lights were treated as a known hazard, like flak or searchlights. This casual acceptance marked a strange shift. Air crews had adapted to the presence of events they could not understand or control. Mission briefings sometimes included mentions of possible Foo Fighter meetings, listed alongside weather conditions and expected enemy resistance. Lieutenant Frederick Ringwald kept a personal diary throughout his tour. His entries from January 1945 give insight into how air crews processed the mystery. After running into lights during a mission over southern Germany, he described how the balls kept perfect formation despite rough weather that shook his bomber badly. The contrast stressed their otherworldly nature. The Pacific theater experiences mirrored those in Europe. Pilots flying long-range missions reported lights that came with them for hundreds of miles. These meetings sometimes lasted hours, far longer than most European sightings. Commander William Jackson documented a meeting near the Philippines. His plane was at 12,000 feet when 3 red balls appeared below. They climbed rapidly. Jackson did standard intercept moves, but the objects avoided his approach easily. They kept a distance of about 200 yards. They matched his course and speed exactly. Jackson noted exact times, heights, and compass directions throughout the meeting. He recorded instrument readings. He hoped to detect some signature of how they moved. His radio equipment showed no interference. His magnetic compass worked normally. His engine instruments showed no problems. The lights left no trace on any electronic system. After the war, several pilots tried to organize their experiences. Veterans groups sometimes discussed the events. They compared notes and looked for patterns. These informal looks gave interesting observations but no clear answers. The most consistent finding was that no two meetings were exactly alike, yet all shared core features. Modern researchers looking at historical records note several troubling parts. The first is the complete lack of physical proof. Despite hundreds of meetings, no debris was ever found, no clear photos were taken, no material traces were left behind. The second troubling part is how selective the appearances were. The lights seemed to prefer certain types of missions and specific areas. They appeared more often during major operations than routine patrols. This selectivity suggests intention rather than random chance. The third part is how the events eventually stopped. After being regular happenings throughout late 1944 and early 1945, sightings dropped sharply after May 1945. Whatever caused the event seemed specifically interested in that particular moment in history. These questions remain unanswered. The Foo Fighters appeared. They performed their mysterious observations. They vanished into history. They left behind hundreds of witness accounts. Official paperwork, a mystery that has lasted for nearly 80 years. Whatever they were, they showed abilities that modern technology still cannot copy. Silent operation, impossible movement, perfect tracking accuracy, complete immunity to weapons fire. Some mysteries solve themselves given enough time and looking into things. Others last. They resist every try at explanation. The Foo Fighters fall into the second group. They remain one of World War II's most thoroughly documented yet completely unexplained events. Hundreds of trained military watchers saw them. Official agencies looked into them. And in the end, no one could clearly say what they were or where they came from. The lights that followed bombers through European skies and trailed fighters over the Pacific left no physical proof. They fired no weapons. They caused no deaths. They did no damage. They just watched. And when the war ended, they withdrew. They left behind only questions and the memory of something that made no sense. Were they secret weapons? Natural events? Visitors from elsewhere? The answer remains hidden. Hidden somewhere in the crossing of history, science, and the unknown. The pilots who ran into them are nearly all gone now. They took their first-hand experiences with them. What remains are the reports, the paperwork, the enduring mystery of the Foo Fighters. Whatever answer eventually comes up, if one ever does, it will need to explain all the facts people saw, the matching sightings across many theaters, the accuracy of the tracking behavior, the complete absence of radar signals, the ability to pass through that let bullets and planes go through them without harm, the clear intelligence in their movements, and the sudden disappearance when fighting stopped. Until that answer arrives, the Foo Fighters remain what they were in 1944, objects that resisted identification. They challenged understanding. They showed features that continue to puzzle researchers nearly 80 years later. They hover at the edge of history and mystery, witnessed by many but understood by none. A reminder that even in our most documented conflicts, some things refuse to be explained. The skies over Europe and the Pacific have long since cleared of wartime traffic. The bombers and fighters that once filled them are museum pieces now, relics of a conflict that reshaped the world. But somewhere in those same skies, for a brief period in human history, something else flew. Something that watched our most destructive war unfold. It remained untouched by our weapons. It left without leaving a trace. The Foo Fighters were real enough to be seen, documented enough to be looked into, mysterious enough to remain unexplained. They represent one of those rare cases where official records, many witnesses, and physical impossibility meet, where what was seen cannot be matched with what we know about the physical world. And perhaps that is the most unsettling part of all. Not that we ran into something strange during the chaos of global war, but that despite decades of looking into it, study, and technological progress, we still cannot say with certainty what those lights were, or why they chose to appear when and where they did. The mystery endures, hovering somewhere between documented fact and unexplained event, waiting for an answer that may never come. If you found this story intriguing, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Have you heard other accounts of wartime oddities? Do you have ideas about what the Foo Fighters might have been? Subscribe to join us next time as we explore another mystery that refuses to be explained.